Happy New Year and back at 'em here in 2020. Hard to believe that that's the year, but the calendar has flipped, and with it, Tom Crawford on the other end of this microphone, and yours truly, Ryan Schuling, the Great Lakes Divide podcast, brought to you by the Record Lounge in Rio Town. It's a new year, time for new savings and new music. Check them out. They're off of Washington in the Rio Town Marketplace, just south of downtown Lansing from I-496. Just take Washington South. It's on the east side of the street. And they're front and center now at their new store location. Plenty of room to display all the latest and greatest in vinyl. They also have high-fidelity stereo equipment that you won't find anywhere else. And if they don't have it, they'll special order it for you within 24 to 48 hours. Heather Frowery, her entire staff, proud supporters of the Great Lakes Divide, and we proudly support them and invite you to support local business with the Record Lounge in Rio Town. Plenty to get to here as we begin the new year and ring it in with a couple of bowl game recaps. We'll take a look ahead to the national championship in football coming up on Monday night as well. And in addition, basketball. Last night, Michigan State, 20-point winners over a very tough, stout Illinois team, sending a message perhaps to the rest of the Big Ten. The Spartans remain the only undefeated team in Big Ten play. Just 3 games in, they're 3-0, and getting key performances from key performers. We'll break that down a little bit later in our podcast. And of course, the big preview, the big Great Lakes Divide showdown between Michigan State this Sunday afternoon at Breslin Student Events Center between the Wolverines and the Spartans as we bring in Blue Belly Tom Crawford. And Michigan State, winners in their new Era Pinstripe Bowl against Wake Forest. Tom and I both predicted scores in the 20s. I thought 20 would be enough to win for Michigan State. Final score 20-17 was my prediction. Tom predicted a 24-20 win for Wake Forest. This one really could have gone either way, but it was a tale of two halves, and this will be a running theme for us for both bowl games. First, between Michigan State, Wake Forest. Secondly, between Michigan and Alabama. And for Michigan State's part, they did not give up a single point in the second half. They stymied the run, limited Wake Forest to a one-man attack, and that was Jamie Newman, their quarterback, who, by coincidence, has entered the transfer portal. He will play for a different school in his graduate year. And he was below 500 in passing in this game, 12 for 27, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns, did have an interception. He was also the team's leading rusher with 87 yards on 17 carries, nary a ground touchdown for the Demon Deacons in a final score of Michigan State 27, Wake Forest 21. Tom, I was down in Florida watching this game with our good mutual friend, former intern of yours on the Drive with Jack. That's Chris Castellani. And the thing that stood out to me for Michigan State was a bit more consistency defensively, especially in the second half. But as you took this game in, what stood out to you?
Well, Brian Lewerke stood out to me, Ryan, and Happy New Year to you. Yeah, the fact he threw 320 through the air and a variety of receivers. I'm thinking probably as many as 10 different receivers for Michigan State, led by Cody White, who now has a decision to make. I think he might have, with that performance tonight, be tinkering with the idea of leaving early for the NFL. No, an impressive win for Michigan State in a Fleabag ball game against, let's be real, a Fleabag opponent in Wake Forest, third best team in the ACC. But it's a necessary win. Michigan State needed this win really, really bad to generate some kind of positivity coming out of the season. Now with that record at 7-6, they have some momentum going in the offseason play. A lot of young kids are playing for Michigan State. That's a good thing. But the big glaring thing for Michigan State, in my estimation, with this program, is a 7-hour deposition coming up this month with Mark D'Antonio, and the fallout from that, if that has any tarnishing element to the program.
Certainly, that'll be something we keep tabs on, and that is coming up in just a little over a week or so. And Mark D'Antonio, what comes out of that deposition, again, 7 hours for him, it'll be pure hell, but this is what's been granted by the courts. Not sure what will come out to the public in terms of how that progresses, but will definitely be worth keeping tabs on, and that's what Tom and I intend to do. For this game, Michigan State fell behind. It was a 7-play, 65-yard drive by Wake Forest that kind of matriculated down the field, to quote the great Hank Stram. Took just 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Wake goes on top 7-0. Michigan State has to punt. They trade a couple of those. Michigan State has to settle for a field goal. And then this game turned, I think, in large part, at least in terms of keeping the level playing field with the Mike Panashuk pick six. It was deflected. It was an alert play by Panashuk. He takes it into the end zone, gives the old Derek Jeter tip of the cap as he removes his helmet, gets a penalty for that, but I get points for creativity. Michigan State takes the lead 10-7. They would relinquish it, trading touchdowns back and forth with Wake and trailing at the half. This looked like a game, perhaps, Tom, where Michigan State would be punished for settling for field goals, which is what they had to do outside of the Panashuk pick six touchdown that put them on top 10-7. 3 field goals in that first half. They did have the touchdown 3 plays, 70 yards toward the end of the half, but trailed at the break 21-20. At that point, how did you feel about where this game was going against what you call a Fleabag opponent in Wake Forest?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about, ESPN continued their, the disrespect to Michigan State. Panashuk's name was mispronounced not only during the game, but throughout every sports center for the next 2 days. So yeah, that was kind of hilarious. I don't know how you butcher that name or do the research for that. To be honest with you, Ryan, I thought Michigan State was going to find a way to lose this game. It had that feel to it. And it had nothing to do with what I wanted or didn't want. And when Coughlin missed that chip shot field goal to close out the game, leaving the door wide open for Wake Forest, I just thought this is a microcosm of the season. Just, Keystone Cop elements of play. You miss a chip in, it's wide open, but hey, I give it credit to Michigan State's defense for closing out the game, which was, that's the strong suit. Michigan State's defense. Replacing that defense with is 4 or 5 really, really good players. Now there lies the challenge for Spartan football 2020.
Yeah, 28-yard field goal missed by Matt Coughlin. This was kind of a signature moment for the season, as Coughlin was a bit waffly, especially in the early going of the 2019 campaign. Michigan State had a couple of fumbles in this game. And this, again, it was shooting themselves in the foot, keeping a Wake Forest team that probably, by second-half standards, did not belong in the contest, and just kept them alive, kept giving them chances. Cody White did have the big performance, had that 10-yard touchdown grab to cap off what was Michigan State's, I think, finest drive, 10 plays, 73 yards, just under 5 minutes that it took there. Not sure about Cody White considering the jump to the NFL with the strong receiving class that we've seen, and we'll get to Jerry Jeudy in just a moment from Alabama, Tom. But Cody does finish with 8 catches for 97 yards in that score. Trenton Gillison, 4 catches for 88 yards for his part, and Jalen Naylor, a name to keep an eye on going forward into the next season as well. If he can remain healthy, a speedy option that can give a quarterback a lot of leeway on offense, 5 catches for 60 yards. But Cody White, should he declare for the draft, where would you see him going? Just rough sketch in an NFL draft scenario, Tom.
If he came out or right now, I think I don't know, 5th round. I mean, he hasn't had that glaring of performance. My estimation on the NFL, and I'm a college football kind of guy, so I'm probably not a good testimony on this, but unless you're going first round or early second, I don't know why these cats don't stay and try to nurture their resume, if you will. And with better video clips and just show exploits of what you can do against key competition. Michigan State has a challenging schedule next year that he could really showcase to the NFL what he could do. So I think he should stay. Myself, I don't understand why he would even think about it. But he's a good receiver. There's no question about it. And Michigan State could really utilize him next year.
Tail of the tape for the Spartans in this one. Again, they hold on to win it 27-21, and only one score in the second half either way, and that was the Cody White touchdown that proved to be the difference, that turned a 21-20 deficit into a 27-21 win. Michigan State did amass 497 yards in this game, 320 through the air for Brian Lewerke, 177 on the ground. This will go a little bit maybe under-discussed, but I think this is a big part, too, that Michigan State was able to establish some form of a running game, and Elijah Collins a big part of that, averaging over 4.5 yards per carry and just under 100 yards total for the game. Brian Lewerke looked to be, at least in part, his old self, running the ball on the ground, did run in for a touchdown and a nice kind of read option for him. But Michigan State, again, time of possession, a big factor here. They had some long sustained drives, didn't always cash those in, but had almost to 10 minutes more of possession than Wake Forest, 35-10 to 24-50. 2 turnovers for Michigan State against just 1 for Wake Forest. But again, the tail of the tape, the yards stand out to me. The time of possession stands out to me. And for a Michigan State team, let's say the deposition notwithstanding, Tom, there have been overtures at least made by recruits that have had visits from Mark D'Antonio in recent past that there might not be any shakeup on the staff. I think that might just be coach speak to try to communicate stability within the ranks coaching-wise. But you have to believe that Mark D'Antonio is taking a long, hard look at both sides of the football and where they fell short. Recruiting certainly stands out in my mind, but also development, execution. I mean, you can go down the line. Just overall performance by this Michigan State football program this year in a 7-6 campaign, as it turns out. Can you imagine a scenario where Michigan State comes to the table for the spring game with this exact same coaching staff intact in the exact same roles?
Absolutely, and for that reason, that's why I know there was a lot of Michigan State fans who were conflicted on what they wanted to have happen in this Pinstripe Bowl. I talked to fans last week prior to this game, said, listen, I bleed green and white, but Michigan State's got to lose this game to force change. And they were thinking that a win would allow just indifference for Mark D'Antonio. And I truly believe that was the case, win or lose. I mean, the president comes out and endorses him. I know that what's he going to say and all that stuff. But, Mark D'Antonio is in position, he's going to make $9 million in 13 months, and I know Michigan State fans are frustrated with that fact. This is what we get for $9 million in that span of time. But I don't think if there'll be change, there'll be minor change. And to be quite honest with you, you call that coach speak of recruits being told there's no changes. That's called lying in my mind. That's lying to these kids. Saying that. So I will, if that is true, that's wrong in my estimation.
So Michigan State new Era Pinstripe Bowl winners over Wake Forest, a feather in their cap at least to cap off the season, and they finish with a winning record at 7-6 with a 27-21 victory. We'll see what happens with the deposition. We'll count down the time between then and the spring game and keep an eye on all coaching alerts as well and pass those along to you, our Great Lakes Divide listeners. Continuing with my Tampa vacation, I did visit St. Pete Beach. I did go to Krabby Bill's. I did have stone crab. So all these things were going my way, Tom. A Michigan State Bowl victory. I got to admit, that was nice. It was fun to watch. And then settling in for the New Year's Day bastion of bowls. Before we get to Michigan, they used to have the Outback Bowl was in the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. They would stagger that start with the Citrus Bowl, and then you'd have the Rose Bowl later, Sugar Bowl at night, and even more bowls as it would turn out going back a little bit further. But it just seemed kind of like a lackluster plate, if you will, in front of us for New Year's Day to enjoy. I know you had all your attention focused on the one game, but don't you miss the days where New Year's Day was just a bowl bonanza from start to finish?
Yeah, when you had to go 3 TVs wide, 4 TVs wide. But this is all ESPN driven, though, Ryan. I mean, ESPN wants to cover every game, right? And including that's why they incorporated that Gator Bowl game. They're going to try to program and string this programming all the way till as close as they can get to January 13th, which is a big gap of time. I mean, there's one bowl. Miami of Ohio is playing in a bowl game on Monday night. See what that kind of draws. But ESPN is trying to cover every game, and then Fox is throwing in a few nuggets here. CBS with their typical Sun Bowl coverage, and here and there's a couple others. But it's just stringing it out and bringing it. Myself personally, I love football. And I love college football, and I can watch bowl games come hell or high water. I mean, I watched that game last night with IU and in Tennessee without batting an eye, along with the Michigan State game. I was watching 2 things at the same time, basketball game. But, that's the reason why. But, the Citrus Bowl, you had 2 games to choose from at the 1 o'clock slot, and then the Rose Bowl. Nothing goes against that, and nothing goes against the Sugar Bowl. That's what I love about the Rose and the Sugar. Those committees are not deviating. Our games are on January 1, unless they do that Sunday thing. That's always been the wiggle room on that, where Sunday falls on New Year's Day, and the NFL comes into play. But other than that time, the Rose and the Sugar or on New Year's Day. I like that.
And they maintain the integrity of their matchups for the most part, with the Rose Bowl pitting the Pac-12 champion, Oregon, and in this case, Wisconsin, because Ohio State was bumped up as the champion of the Big Ten into the playoff, and that was a phenomenal game. It would turn late on a fumble by Wisconsin. The Ducks win it 28-27. Sugar Bowl solid as well. Number 5, Georgia against number 7, Baylor. We'll see what happens with Matt Rule. He's a hot name in NFL coaching circles at the moment and is rumored to be tied to the New York Giants job. And again, we'll keep tabs on that. 26-14, Georgia wins it. They were up 19-0 at halftime and basically just held on. But an impressive performance, but what has been a year-long venture by this Georgia Bulldogs defense against an explosive Baylor offense keeps them down to just 2 touchdowns. And, of course, that game features the SEC champion in theory. In this case, it bumps down to Georgia because LSU went to the college football playoff against Baylor. And, again, they were the second-place team to just Oklahoma, who was in the playoffs. So integrity of matchups, geography there, Sugar Bowl pitting SEC against Big 12, and then the Pac-12 against the Big 10 in the Rose Bowl, developed and delivered a couple of very entertaining games to watch. Another one, the Outback Bowl, Minnesota. I got to go here just for a moment before we get to Michigan, Tom, because you've been a bit of a critic of P.J. Fleck and a doubter, and I understand the skepticism because he comes with it, this glossy package with a lot of hype and a lot of banter and talk and row the boat and Sky Ma. But when it's all said and done in this Outback Bowl, Minnesota gets the win from phenomenal performances by their wide receivers, 31-24 over a very solid Auburn team. What kind of statement did this victory make for Minnesota?
Well, and all due, I paid homage yesterday on my video blog, Tom's Take, to P.J. Fleck, and I'll continue to do that, make them my team of the week on Sunday night on Jack Ebling's Press Pass. That one, I didn't see it coming. I thought Auburn's disparate, talent advantage, speed advantage from the SEC would win over Minnesota. But I was so impressed by Minnesota. I was watching that on Monitor 2 during the Michigan-Alabama game on Monitor 1 on the Citrus Bowl. And, hey, listen, this program is for real. And as I even project the 2020 record for Michigan, which I have them at 9-3, we talk about that at another time. But one of those 3 losses will be up in Minneapolis when they play the Gophers on the road. That Minnesota team is for real and will definitely be a candidate to win the Big Ten West in 2020.
I want to see where Tyler Johnson goes in this NFL draft. The senior, 6'2", 205, solid build. He had 86 catches for over 1,300 yards. That was bordering top 10 nationally there, and he had a big game in this one against Auburn. 12 catches, 204 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tyler Johnson, is he a first-round pick, Tom?
Oh, yeah, I think so. And, people have been saying this all season long, and I haven't really, grasped onto the idea. But Minnesota's got as good a receivers, maybe it's just short of Ohio State, as anybody in the Big Ten, and one of the top receiving corps in the country. Yeah, absolutely. He's for real, and that touchdown catch he went to close out the win for Minnesota was certainly fitting for him. What a great career he's had for the Gophers.
Great performance, and arguably the best that the Big Ten got during this bowl season with Minnesota's upset win over Auburn. I was with Tom. I thought Auburn would win big. They had a tough schedule. They beat Oregon this year. Their 3 losses were all against top SEC contenders, but Minnesota able to pull it out at the end of this one, 31-24. One other Big Ten result, Tom touchdown at Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, and as we record this on Friday morning, this was Thursday night's game. Indiana close, but no cigar. Tennessee wins it 23-22. So the Hoosiers finish 8-5 on the season. Peyton Ramsey with 227 yards passing in that one. Louisiana-Miami, that's the Lending Tree Bowl on Monday night. And Tom will be watching because he watches every bowl game that's possible. And then we have to wait a week from Monday until the national championship. Tom, we'll get more into this matchup as the week progresses and we get into our subsequent podcast here. But just a thought on LSU, the dominant performance we saw from Joe Burrow, as good as I've ever seen in the college football playoff, and he is no doubt going to be the number 1 overall pick by the Cincinnati Bengals. And then Clemson getting some help, you would think, some break breaks from the referees and otherwise in their win over Ohio State. And it had to be kind of fascinating and ironic. So much grief given to Michigan fans for JT was short in the Michigan-Ohio State game. And here are the Buckeyes fans, nobody complaining more than them. And how about their press corps getting out of hand in the press box? I saw all kinds of tweets and reports on that, including a colleague of mine who used to be on the Schuling Report, Kevin Noon, just getting very emotional in the press box.
Well, that's Ohio State. That's their fan. It's cult-like, and we noticed that in Big Ten. I noticed that at Big Ten Media Days. I noticed that at post-game pressers for Jim Harbaugh's press conference after Ohio State beating Michigan. I mean, they are. There's no more better description of media than fan media when it comes to Ohio State, and that includes Tim May, who everybody thinks is this incredible pro. He's such a fanboy; it's disgusting. So, that did not surprise me. But I came this short of actually feeling sorry for Ohio State. But then it settles in all that after the 16 game when Michigan got jobbed on that spot. That should have been a walk-off win right there.
Yep.
They would have won this. They would have got a shot at Indy. That Ohio State be in the receiving corps. But, hey, they are the better team than Clemson. But I'm telling you what, I concur with what you said. This LSU win over Oklahoma, not a vintage Oklahoma team. And an Oklahoma team, it was a distant four of those four CFP teams. That was as impressive a performance, and Joe Burrow is phenomenal. I cross between Tom Brady and Drew Brees' college version thereof. I just think that they are going to roll Clemson on the 13th of January.
I can't see it going any other way. 7 touchdown passes in the first half for Joe Burrow. He ends up with almost 500 yards passing in a 63-28 win. The word I would use for Burrow, and you brought up some lofty comparisons there, Tom, and I think they're apt, just smooth. This guy is so smooth to watch in the pocket, the decisions he makes, the throws he can make, the deep ball that he throws, the touch throw that he throws, the jump ball in the end zone. There's not a throw that Joe Burrow cannot make.
No, and his ability to instinctively, with eyes in back of his head, this is Brady-esque, going to the quiet spot of the pocket, just when he needs to, just enough of the quiet spot and make the throw. It's amazing.
LSU a 5.5-point favorite in that game. I think you take that point spread and run. But again, we'll have much more on the breakdown of this game as our podcasts continue. Now, finally, to the Citrus Bowl, the VRBO, not sure what that is, but VRBO Citrus Bowl in Orlando. I was just down I-4 from this game, considered going to it, and the first half alone put Michigan on equal footing with Alabama. They were able to deliver the first punch in this game after Alabama scored the touchdown to take the lead, to get back and tie it, to take a lead with a field goal. They got 2 subsequent field goals in the first half, but this might have been a kind of that warning sign that field goals were not going to be enough. And what stood out to me was just the lack of execution at the end of the first half for Michigan. Clock management was poor. They had to settle for a Quinn Nordine bomb, which he hit, but it shouldn't have come down to that. Shea Patterson takes a sack, and that's where I'll start this conversation in Michigan's 35-16 defeat at the hands of the Crimson Tide, Tom. They get outscored 21-0. In the second half. Nick Saban, Alabama, makes those adjustments that they're famous for and that you were probably dreading at halftime, even though Michigan held the lead. They couldn't convert touchdowns instead of field goals. And Shea Patterson, it just seemed like there was something lacking in his performance. What stood out right off the blush to you?
Well, I use that overused term, microcosm, again, against good teams. I mean, the Ohio States of the world, maybe, I don't know if Wisconsin's in that category, but Michigan does not make good halftime. The anticipation of adjustments, okay? So Nick Saban brings in a nickel package in the second half to stop Michigan's run. And basically, whatever, to cover all bases, if you will, the run and the pass, and it worked. And what was Michigan's counterpunch to that? They don't seem to be able to do that offensively, and I'm not picking on Josh Getz. I think he's got a great future there, but defensively, the fact that I go back to playing zone all the time, Bo Schembechler keeping everything in front of them, let the opponent have to take 12 plays to beat you. They'll make a mistake by the time they get there. But the fact that Michigan secondary allows great receivers to get behind them, mind-boggling. 265 yards in the first half, 16 first downs in the first half, and then all of a sudden they hit the wall in the second half. Again, microcosm of the year, outcoached and disappointing. A revelation time, I think, for Michigan fans. It is what it is. This is an 8 to 10 win program. They won't, as long as Harbaugh there, they will not beat Ohio State. That's 2 more losses before he's let go after 2 more years when Ward Manuel will be forced to delete him, and they will not beat high-level teams in high-profile bowl games.
I'll get to the reasons why on that in just a moment, Tom, because there's a lot to unpack from what you just said. But the standout performances here, Mac Jones, just a quarterback that's not going to get in his own way. And that's what, again, stood out to me about him. He's not dynamic. He's not flashy, but he doesn't make mistakes. He takes what the defense gives him. And quite frankly, early in this game, Michigan gave him a lot. 3 touchdowns, no picks, over 300 yards passing. And Jerry Jeudy is simply an absolute witch on the outside. 6 catches, 204 yards, 1 touchdown, and that was on the very first pass of the game. And I feel bad for poor Dax Hill. He's a freshman. And talk about a welcome to the big-time moment. Oh, here you go. You have to go one-on-one with arguably the best receiver in college football, and to nobody's surprise, Jeudy gets behind him. Like you mentioned, they don't bracket off coverage. Just take us through that first play, Tom, and how many objects you threw in your living room.
Well, I mean... this wasn't any surprise. I mean, how many times have I said in the last 3 weeks? I basically said Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith. I just kept repeating those names. This is a matchup nightmare, and it was those four core receivers that Bama had going against Michigan's secondary. It's all about the matchups, and it's position group to position group. I knew this was going to happen. Did I think it would happen on the first play? No, but. Hey, they did make adjustments for that. But I think more glaring than him getting behind Dax Hill, who is the fastest guy Michigan has in their secondary, is late in the game, Bama's last touchdown to Clint, it was 28-16. They went down, or no, it was 21-16. They went down for the clinching touchdown. I'm trying to think what possession it was. They ran that deep crosser to Jerry Jeudy, and Levert's chasing him down. In the separation that Jerry Jeudy had on Levert Hill, in the span of 15, 20 yards, growing separation, shows you the disparity in speed between Alabama's NFL caliber receivers and Michigan's secondary, and just general speed differential between Bama and Michigan. That's a big part of the equation, but even more than that is the coaching disparity.
And I want to get to that, Tom, as in these 2 second halves combined to close out the season, the 56-27 loss to Ohio State, and in this loss to Alabama, 35-16, Michigan was outscored in the second half against those two teams, Tom, by a combined 49-11. Ohio State outscores Michigan 28-11 in the second half, and Alabama outscores Michigan 21-0. What switch is flipped at halftime for these teams against Michigan, and why are the Wolverines unable to answer, to respond, to counterpunch?
I'm not smart enough to figure it out. I can in peripheral. They took away the run. Obviously, I'll tell you what a large part of it had to do with Alabama in that first half, and why Michigan was so effective, in the running game. Where Michigan had $135 on the ground, I think, in the first half, and I don't know if it was 17 or 27, whatever they had in the second half, when Zach Charbonnet and Haskins were running, was poor tackling. I mean, it was execution, lack thereof. I saw that when I rewatched the game in the first half versus second half, and actually Nick Saban addressed that at halftime, if you remember that halftime interview. And so execution has a lot to do with motivation to execute. I don't think Michigan's getting the greatest motivation from their coaching staff. I mean, and the reason I say that, and I don't mean to go off on tangents right now, but the acceptance of defeat. When I'm walking out of Chrysler Arena, heading to my car after Michigan lost to Ohio State, and I'm seeing players I recognize who had pivotal parts of the game kind of laughing it up after the game, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that when they're carted back to the Glick building and, seeing Ambry Thomas yucking it up with a Bama player after the game. I want guys that this game hurts. I'm not seeing that in this program from a distance. even as a fan, I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing the Ron Simpkins of the world bawling outside the locker room because it matters to him so much. I want to see more of that. That's why I question the Jim Harbaugh level of motivation of his football team.
I got a lot of questions for you here, Tom, and I want you to respond to them because I know how passionate you are and I know how knowledgeable you are. You've watched this team inside and out your entire life, but this season in particular. Hassan Haskins has had a good season. He averaged just over 3.3 yards per carry in this game, 18 for 61. Charbonnet was part of that big 1-2 punch in this game against Alabama, establishing the ground game and getting Michigan out to that halftime lead, and yet he had 5 fewer carries than Haskins. Why the over-reliance on Haskins, and why didn't they go to Charbonnet more?
I don't know. I mean, Charbonnet was more effective. He had 13 carries, 84. I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I just know that in the second half, I was completely shut down. And Michigan, a lot of it is they're so freaking predictable. In a lot of ways. They're going to run, and then throw. I mean, they're running on first down and not a lot of creativity in that third quarter when they were shut out, and they were shut out in the fourth. But they were completely stymied in that third quarter. There was nothing coming out of that offense, and you just knew the end result. But and lack of execution, I thought Alabama's defensive line really ramped things up in the second half. There was nothing there, and the quarterback pressures were on Shea, and Shea bails out of that pocket. And if you notice, especially when Michigan's on the right hash mark, and he'll get flushed out, and then he's drifting right, and nothing good's going to come out of that. The only thing is he might throw it over his body and might get a pick. He almost did on one of those, but it's frustrating to watch. There's no question about it.
Let's look at tail of the tape for Michigan-Alabama in this game. In time of possession, this is a more frustrating part for the Wolverines. It favored the Michigan by over 9 minutes to the tune of 9.5, 34-47 to just 25-13 for Alabama. Now, they did have that quick strike Jerry Jeudy touchdown to start this game, Alabama. That didn't take much time off the clock, but Michigan won the battle on the ground overall in this game, had 162 yards to 153. But lackluster performance in the passing game by Shea Patterson, decision-making in the pocket. Again, this is something that reverts back to the first part of this season, Tom, where we saw the questions about Shea Patterson, and then he rights the ship. We talk about the pivotal turning point of this 2019 campaign being the halftime of that game against Penn State. He rolls offensively from there. You wouldn't put the Ohio State loss on Shea Patterson, but in many ways, this loss to Alabama I felt was a shortcoming of Patterson in consistency in the passing game. In throwing the deep ball, he just couldn't do it. He didn't have the touch. He threw it too flat. He threw it too far. He didn't give his receivers a chance. I mean, Tom, Donovan Peoples-Jones, people kind of go, maybe he'll go to the NFL. He only had one catch in this game for 34 yards. It was a big one, but it's the only grab that he had. As you evaluate this passing game for Michigan and Shea Patterson's performance within it against Alabama, where does it fall short?
Oh, incredibly falls short. I mean, 7 deep throws that were over. You're right about the flat passes. He overthrew 7 times. That's a lot of misses in my mind. And when you're going against a good team, everybody said, "Oh, Michigan's got to play a perfect game to compete." I mean, they definitely needed to play a near perfect game to win. And yeah, you look at those 4 CFP teams, Ryan, and what do they all have? They all have great quarterback play. Michigan doesn't have that. They have good quarterback play, and they haven't had a great They haven't had a guy who could deliver from an aerial stance, throwing the ball, making big-time throws in a crucial game since Chad Henne, when Lloyd, they closed on beat Tebow's team his last game. Yep. When he's throwing to Manningham, I mean, he was just terrific in that game, okay? That's the last time. That's freaking 12 years ago. Michigan has got to ramp up the caliber of quarterback that they land. Is Dylan McCaffrey that guy? J.J. McCarthy, the guy who's coming a year later? I don't know. But I don't understand why Jim Harbaugh can't land a big-time quarterback. And this was a transfer aspect right now. Shea is he's a competitor, and he hurts when he loses. I appreciate that about him. He takes it personal. But, man, his foot speed and his size and his arm strength is lacking compared to what those CFP teams have at quarterback.
You go in the history of the quarterbacks from Michigan, and it used to be, I guess you just kind of took it for granted. They would churn one out that would get the job done. And you can go back to, Elvis Gerbach in the early 90s, Todd Collins following him. You had Brian Greasy. I mean, you can go down the line in the litany, and it ends with Chad Henne. It ends with Chad Henne. And here is my whole deal with Jim Harbaugh and why it just perplexes me, Tom. This is a guy who in and of himself was a premier Big Ten quarterback. Jim Harbaugh himself. He had Colin Kaepernick, turned him into a wonderkind in San Francisco, a guy that before or since Jim Harbaugh has not been worth anything. You can argue the politics of it, but he hasn't been on an NFL roster. He hasn't delivered. He hasn't performed. And I look at the onslaught of transfer quarterbacks that have come in during Jim Harbaugh's 5-year tenure. You could say that he peaked with Iowa's Jake Rudock, who came over, had a nice performance, but again, you're plucking the transfer portal for that. Houston's John O'Korn fell well short of expectations. Now Ole Miss, Shea Patterson. Michigan had Wilton Spate. But, I mean, you can say, well, here comes Dylan McCaffrey, and Michigan fans time and again, they're going to be Charlie Brown kicking the football with Lucy holding it. Joe Milton, maybe, I don't know, but what gives you any reason to believe or confidence in this Michigan program, Jim Harbaugh, for bringing a freshman quarterback in, a recruit, and why that can't come to fruition and what is holding this Michigan offense back? Because I think they got a good coordinator in place, Tom, with Josh Gaddis. We saw the play calling. We saw, I think, at least throughout the second half of this season, the offense click into place. But you're right. They haven't had an elite arm at quarterback. I'm trying to figure out why.
Well, I don't either. That's why I've resigned myself, and that's what I did in my video blog yesterday. I mean, this is, I'm not saying I'm giving up on the idea that Jim Harbaugh. I am giving up on the hope that Jim Harbaugh is going to win a Big Ten championship and what I perceive to be his 7-year effort. I mean that he will get at the University of Michigan. I just think in 2 years from now he won't be there after that. But I think he will be there until 2 years from now, because he can't land that car. Listen, this Chris Partridge departure for Ole Miss, Michigan's top recruiter by far. One of the top recruiters in the country just left the Michigan football program. Special teams coach and recruiting guru Chris Partridge, who coached Jabril Peppers at Paramus Catholic High School and owns New Jersey in terms of recruiting. He's gone now. Okay,
yeah.
Well, how are you going to fill that void? So, I mean, there's some big-time issues right now. Defining season coming up for Michigan, and I don't think we're going to like the definition in terms of taking it next level. They will be there. They will beat Michigan State. They'll win those 2 games, like I said, Whiskey and Penn State. But winning against quality teams on the road, not going to happen, as it hasn't for the last 20 games in a row. And winning big-time bowl games against high-level competition is not going to happen either.
And again, instability at quarterback. We talked about the transfers coming in. How about the transfers going out? Wilton Spate ended up at UCLA. Remember Brandon Peters? He ended up at Illinois. There has not been in 5 years, Tom, a program quarterback who came in as a freshman, matriculated as a senior, left the program 4 years in, earned his starting role, got the job done. That hasn't happened at Michigan. And I don't know, you go to the transfer route and you want to get that short-term fix. You don't have the long-term plan in place. You're hoping that you have it again with either McCaffrey and or Milton. But the inability to locate, to land, to recruit, to develop, to have a quarterback in your system improve under the tutelage of Jim Harbaugh, it blows my mind as an outsider objectively watching and seeing this transpire.
Well, I can't argue. I mean, let's be real. Shea Patterson was a 5-star quarterback. 5-star. So it's, I mean, and we get probably too caught up in that. Me in particular, 5-star, 4 stars, you got to get this, you got to get that. That's all, that's all subjective. And you really don't know how the kid's going to be. But just physically, in terms of arm strength and foot speed, it's not there. Do you see it there?
No.
In Shea?
No, it's all a step behind. A step behind and a throw too far, and it's just it never really all came together for Shea Patterson.
No, it really didn't. Hey, listen, he beat Michigan State twice. He was 2-0 on Sparty. That, for me personally, that's a good thing. So he'll always have a sweet spot in my heart for that regard. But beyond that, His best win was probably over Michigan State. Of the 2-year performance, that was his best win, I think.
Finally, Tom, you mentioned the departure of Partridge for Lane Kiffin's staff and Ole Miss and the loss in recruiting that presents. Probably the number one issue is what's going to happen at quarterback for Michigan in 2020, whether it's McCaffrey or Milton or, go off the board for another option. But, the Don Brown question did not get answered in the affirmative, at least not for me coming out of this game against Alabama, where the Crimson Tide, again, they're playing with chess pieces against checkers for Don Brown, and how much of that's Don Brown's fault, I think, is up to the eye of the beholder. But where it goes from here for Michigan, what questions need to be answered during this particular offseason when you're looking to the spring game, when you're looking to the fall, and you're already conceding, Tom, that you don't think this is a program that can win those big games. But where does it turn for Michigan? Where can it turn for Michigan in the short term, in a 1-year turnaround? What can happen?
Well, schematically, there's going to have to be some changes, I think, with Don Brown. Whether Don Brown's involved with that or just he's taking a different approach. I think this aggressive, dicey, risk-taking, predominantly man-to-man defense is not working. Because for all when you get against talented, receiving cores and big-time quarterbacks, and you can beat. They got a great formula, tremendous formula for beating marginal teams, below-average teams, beating decent teams at home. But beating big-time competition away from Michigan Stadium doesn't work. All you got to do is look at the data. So there's got to be some schematic changes there. I don't know. You might have to look at your coaching staff. I give Jim Harbaugh a lot of credit in this regard, Ryan, and this is why I'm not going to back down on this. The guy has been willing to make changes. People can criticize Mark D'Antonio, swishing the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic and not having the balls to fire one of the coaches he knows or he's been indebted to. Harbaugh doesn't pull any punches on. He'll fire some. So, maybe who knows what happens to Mike Lodish back in the second year. I don't know what's going to happen with that coaching staff, but he's got to make the right decisions. And I think the Josh Gaddis thing offensively, I think that is a plus, but they got to fix this defense against great teams. And the recruiting void that Partridge will leave, that's got to be ramped up, and I'm not sure who's going to be that guy to do that.
One last thing on the Citrus Bowl before we put it to rest, Tom, a 35-16 defeat at the hands of Alabama. And you were kind of dismissing my whole notion of bringing up the personal rivalry between Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban, the animosity that was there over the satellite camps going way back. But I got to say, I thought of you when Nick Saban decided to punch in one more touchdown there late in the fourth quarter instead of taking a knee. Don't you think that was personal?
Oh, without question. The thing of it is, it was strategically personal. It looked like to me he was basically in a take a knee formation when they came out of the huddle. He almost like sucker punched him into, all of a sudden he ran it in. Bottom line is, I don't have a problem with it. You should have stopped him. It was a running play. It was right up the middle. Stop him. So I don't have a problem. Saban's a dick. Let's be real. We've known that. He treats his staff like crap. But he's a great coach, and it works for him. And I don't think he cheats either. But he's just not. He is what he is. I'll just leave it at that.
And we'll leave that bowl game right where it is, too. Michigan finishes the campaign 9-4 in the Hall of Very Good, but they just aren't a great or elite program, and that was revealed once again against Alabama. And we'll see where it goes from here. I know Tom will be intently tuned in, and you will be as well as a result here on the Great Lakes Divide podcast. With Tom Crawford, I'm Ryan Schuling. It's brought to you each and every time out, once again, by the Record Lounge in Rio Town. It's a new year. Time for some new music. Take a walk down memory lane. They have all the all-time greats and the newest music as well each and every Friday. You want to see what's coming out? They got a whole list on a white or dry erase board that says this is what's coming Friday, this is what's coming the next Friday. Heather Frary is in tune with the music scene with everybody throughout the state. Nobody is more plugged in, pun intended, than her. And they've got the stereo equipment to prove it, to play those vinyl records at their highest capacity for maximum enjoyment. You can check it all all out. It's in the Reotown Marketplace, south on Washington from 496. That's downtown Lansing, the Record Lounge in Reotown. Turning now to basketball, and how about this performance by Michigan State on Thursday night at Breslin Student Events Center? The alumni zone in effect and in full force, and it was noticeable throughout this contest. They weren't stuck on their phones. I know, okay, boomer, whatever. I'm just saying these fans were ready to rock, and the Spartans seemed to feed off of that. And Cassius Winston was dialed in. 21 points for him, made half of his shots, 6 assists, and a sequence in this game that really put it away. Michigan State was being challenged up until halftime. 36-30 was the score at the break, but the Spartans were able to hit big threes down the stretch when it mattered most, and a sequence specifically where Xavier Tillman hit a three, assisted by Cassius Winston, and then right back down after a missed three by Illinois, Gabe Brown nails one as well. This game on that 8-0 run that included a Thomas Kithier pass to Gabe Brown for another jumper, and this is a guy who's instant offense. He's an injection into your veins of momentum and energy. Gabe Brown, they took a 48-38 game at that point and they were able to push it to 56-38, and they would never look back. Again, this is a good Illinois team. I don't know if it's a great team, and we'll see how it bears out in Big Ten play, but they gave Michigan all they could handle as the Wolverines escaped and actually took one in the mouth there, 71-62 in Champaign. So as you watch this game unfold, Tom, with what you knew about Illinois and Coburn down low and what Xavier Tillman was able to do in spite of that, I'll take it back to this analysis. If he's pushed to the 4 position, the power forward traditional position, and Marcus Bingham does what he did last night, which was like a Dennis Rodman, John Salley-like performance, no points, but 12 rebounds, 5 block shots, that frees up Tillman for 19 points, 7 boards, 6 helpers, 4 blocks. Tom, this is the Xavier Tillman we've been talking about since the start of the season, what we've been looking for all year long, and the Spartans got it from him last night.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway when I'm watching the game, and I was texting with a couple of former Michigan players, Michigan State was really, really good in this game, and Illinois was really, really bad. I mean, it's a perfect storm. I mean, 3 of 28 from three-point land for the Illini. Io DeSumo was terrific, but it was pretty much him and one dude, Griffin, coming off the bench. I mean, Illinois had brought nothing to the table. Once again, winning on the road in the Big Ten. We know all that too much. But back to Michigan State, ND. I tell you what, if you got... If Xavier Tillman is going to deliver like that, and Cassius is back to being Cassius, and Aaron Henry is the Aaron Henry that Michigan fans have been yearning for, that trio right there, it takes – I've always said this until I'm blue in the face. If you got 3 really good players that can deliver on a consistent basis, you're in the hunt for a Big Ten title. And for Michigan State, this could be their 3rd in a row. But, I think there's – people got to look at the situation of this schedule for Michigan State at 3-0. They haven't had to go on the road yet to play a formidable team. Their only road game, unlike most other teams in the Big Ten, who are all hovering at 1-1, was at Northwestern, one of the weakest, 1 or 2 team weakest teams in the conference. And so they better win. They better beat Illinois at home. They better beat Michigan at home. They better beat Minnesota at home. Those 3 home games in a row. You have to hold service at home. Because when you go on the road, it's a different story. Illinois is a different team on the road than they are at Assembly Hall in Champaign.
Illinois still held their own in rebounding, and that's not a surprise with the beef they've got up front. Coburn, Bashanas-Vili, Dosumu, as Tom alluded to. 48 all was the rebounding score. It was a push in this game. But what stood out to me, Illinois didn't turn the ball over a lot, just 8 themselves. Michigan State only had 10 turnovers. And with the way they push the ball, a lot of their turnovers are turnovers of aggression. I don't have as big of a problem with that. But Aaron Henry, a little bit of a bugaboo still with the 4 turnovers for his part, but Cassius Winston just 2. They took care of the basketball. I like the combination of Winston and Brown in the backcourt starting with Rocket Watts coming in off the bench. There's less pressure that way. He can deliver. He did. He had 6 points and 3 rebounds in his own right. Foster Lawyer hit a 3. He had 7 points off the bench, so the backcourt got the job done for Michigan State in this game. Didn't need a lot from Thomas Kithier. He only played 13 minutes, but that's because, again, Bingham, unlike Kithier, no knock on Thomas, but Marcus has the frame to be a 5, to be a true 5. Maybe not the bulk yet. He's going to get there, but you saw flashes, and now you've seen a little bit more of the polished, varnished product that Bingham can be in just giving Xavier Tillman room to breathe in this 76-56 win for Michigan State. This all leads up to Sunday's contest, Tom. We've been looking forward to this. It'll be a 1:30 Eastern time start on CBS as Michigan State welcomes in the Michigan Wolverines. And you look at life without Isaiah Livers. I got to believe he's doubtful to return in this game. Maybe you can give us an update there. I think John Teskey's important in this game, how he matches up against Bingham and Xavier Tillman down low. But your read on this matchup for Michigan heading into hostile waters in East Lansing and what needs to happen for the Wolverines to pull out the win?
Well, for Michigan to win this game, they're going to have to get, Isaiah Livers void, and that could be a 3 or 4 week void. That could be a 14 to 16 week void. When you have the pulled groin injury, you just don't know. It's day to day and how he reacts to treatment and such. This is a Brandon Johns opportunity for him. A kid from East Lansing who knows every player on this Michigan State team. How he handles that. The emotional element of coming into the Breslin Center. He was highly recruited by Michigan State. He's an East Lansing kid. He played high school basketball less than a mile from the Breslin Center. That will be interesting to see what he does. John Teskey is obviously a big cog. Can he get help? If Brandon is almost 6'10", that Brandon John Teskey of 4 and 5, that whole they have to bring it strong. And then you're going to have to get Xavier Simpson to be the Xavier Simpson a couple of years ago when he played Cassius Winston, not last year, but 2 years ago. And I do remember Xavier Simpson in the locker room. I was in the locker room at the United Center after they lost to Michigan State for the 3rd time. And this was, 40 minutes after the game because they had gone into the selection show part, that gathering, see when they were going to play in the NCAA tournament. And he was devastated with that loss. So I'm going to be interesting to see how he handles the emotion as well and how he execute, how Xavier does, and how he does from an assist standpoint in the turnover ratio. If he can keep his turnovers down and Brandon and Teskey can deliver. I'm doing a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. And if Franz Wagner can contribute well, I mean, Michigan has a decent chance in this game because they have, they got a lot of depth on that team, even without Isaiah Livers. So it will be interesting to see if they get off with Austin Davis and Castleton coming off the bench. I think it's going to be a great game. I think Michigan will be in the game. I think Michigan, if I was going to make a projection, if you could put a gun in my head, is going to lose the game, but they're going to lose it by about 3 to 5 points, and then I think they will beat Michigan State in the return match with Livers back in the lineup in February.
Well, and we'll see again, and just from a strictly objective standpoint, hoping Isaiah Livers comes back healthy for Michigan because it's a more entertaining game to watch. It's a more entertaining team to watch with him in the lineup, but he will be out for this one. I think that's the difference in this game. I'll take Michigan State by 7. Final score 75-68. I like how Michigan State was able to render Illinois very inefficient, very ineffective offensively. Did you know the Illini took 75 shots in this game and only scored 56 points? And that's because up front, Coburn was just a shell of his former self that we saw against Michigan. He was limited to 5 points on just 2 of 10 shooting. Bashanis-Vili was 3 of 12. Combined, those two were 5 for 22. And a Michigan State can provide more of the same defensively for a Michigan team that is streaky and even without Livers can still score in bunches. This Illinois team was 3 of 28 from 3. 3 of 28 from 3 against Michigan State. Now, the Spartans have had their own struggles from beyond the arc as well this season. They weren't great against Illinois, 7 of 22. But I'm with you, Tom. Brandon Johns can make a big difference in this game. Xavier Simpson finding the mojo that he once had against Cassius Winston. Earlier in their careers, as they parallel one another, Simpson got the better in this matchup. As you'll recall, that has turned now over these last 2 seasons, and that is, to me, by far the most fascinating matchup in this game, is what is Xavier Simpson's mindset, his confidence level, the intangibles, the body language that you see as he matches up one-on-one against Cassius Winston. I think that's going to tell a lot of the story in this game.
That whole little rivalry, player to player rivalry, has had an interesting, a roller coaster ride, if you will, the last couple of years. And I know there's a lot of respect between the two of them. They're different kind of kids. I mean, Xavier is from Lima, Ohio. When you're from Lima, Ohio, you are one tough dude. Let me tell you something. And Cassius is this kind of this, he's almost too nice to a fault. I mean, I'm not saying he's not tough, but I mean that will be interesting to see how that dynamic goes. He was unbelievably effective, though. I thought he was terrific. He was the old Cassius Winston himself. But yeah, I mean, let me tell you something though. Right now, is that Michigan's basketball team right now, as a program, is in good position. But look out where it's going in the future, because Juwan Howard is on a recruiting tear right now.
Yes, he is.
He's got the 4th best recruiting class in the nation. So if Michigan State wants to continue to beat Michigan, they better grab it this year, because I don't think it's going to be there next year.
It all starts this Sunday. Another thing I'll be keeping an eye on, can Marcus Bingham replicate what he did against Illinois and stay with a big, tough, senior, physical guy in John Teske? So many intriguing subplots abound in this one as Juwan Howard locks horns with Tom Izzo for the first time at Breslin Student Events Center. One more time, that's 1 p.m. Eastern this Sunday on CBS. Michigan State, Michigan, the whole basis and crux for the Great Lakes Divide. And that'll do it for us from here for now. So much that we got to. We appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, download, listen, and share with your friends this experience that is GLD. And our thanks to our sponsor once again, Heather Frary and the Record Lounge in Rio Town, for their support. For Tom Crawford, the blue-bellied one himself, I'm Ryan Schuling saying so long for now. We'll talk again, wrapping this up on Sunday night, looking back at Michigan State basketball and taking it from there forward into 2020. Happy New Year, everybody.
I'm looking for monkey business.